Well, this is the first time we're conducting our media forum dito sa University of the Philippines, Bahay Alumni Valdez Room, and we hope in the future we can continue to conduct it here because the atmosphere is much better. But of course, we have to do these initial adjustments ng ating mga system. So welcome to today's forum. We have several innovations today. We also have a skit that will be performed by our cultural group at around 11 o'clock or 11:30 when the Quezon City press and photographers join us dito sa ating forum today. But as I was saying, nakalipas lang po yung July 12 anniversary, 7th anniversary na pinagmamalaki ng mga promoters po ng arbitration proceedings and the award kuno that they call. But actually after 7 years, ano ang na-achieve ng bayan po? What we have is an empty basket. We have nothing. There is no enforcement. We do not gain any additional territory, so-called. The EEZ continues to be disputed, not only by China, but by Vietnam, by Malaysia, by Brunei, and so on. There is really zero result. And if you consider the rest of the impact, it's negative. The nation is divided about this issue. The nation is distracted. So in a very brief presentation, I have the paper here. It's 4 pages, but I will just summarize it so Kaado can have more time, and especially Madam Sas Rogando Sasot. My contention is that the negative consequences of American vassalage of the Philippines today under the present administration is already costing us tremendous damage. And I will relate it to the present crisis that we have, many crises that we have. We have just gone through a period of water insecurity the past few days, past few weeks. In fact, some water supply scheduling had to be instituted in certain parts of Metro Manila. Fortunately, the past few days we have had very heavy rains, and to some extent, Angat Dam has been refilled, but not completely. Since 2017, we have had the chance to resolve this water crisis of Metro Manila and Southern Tagalog region, and that is the Kaliwa Dam. This is a 1970s plan for the projected population and water demands of our Metro Manila and Southern Tagalog region. And of course, that influences and affects the entire country. 1970s pa po itong project na Kaliwa Dam. It was only in 2017 with the signing of the of the agreement between the China Import-Export Bank and the Philippine government, as one of the fruits of the meeting of President Xi Jinping and President Duterte in 2016. 2017, and the MWSS administrator at that time already projected to finish the project by 2022. In other words, last year, we would have additional 600 million liters per day na tubig para sa Metro Manila. But up to today, the project is still being obstructed by various U.S. linked funded or linked institutions and organizations. Since then, senators of the opposition today or during Duterte's time and opposition to China, like Laila de Lima, has been protesting, conducting investigations. The Catholic Bishops' Conference has protested. The leftist groups like Makabayan filed a TRO in 2018 or 2019, and so on. Some may wonder why the Makabayan Black Eye associate with the Americans also. Well, they play a tricky double game. They are anti-imperialist now, but they get a lot of funding from U.S.-linked institutions in Europe, NGOs, and so on, just to oppose China. But again, that is one of the immediate consequences that is very negative for our country. And if we do not push through with the Kaliwa Dam eventually, then it will be fatal. People will be dying fatally. It will be fatal for many Filipinos because of the lack of water The second major impact today that we will show you is the threatened tourism collapse in the country today, this year. Why? In 2019, the Philippines had almost 2 million, 1.9 million Chinese tourists who spent 2.2 billion pesos, dollars, or around 120, 130 billion pesos in the Philippines. Now that we have come out of the COVID-19, we should be normalizing the tourism arrivals from all countries, especially China, which is the biggest tourist market in the world in history, human history. But up to today, since 2023 entered the picture, we have only, our Department of Foreign Affairs has only issued 100 to 200 tourist visas for Chinese tourists a day. When at the peak in 2019, our embassy in China was issuing up to 8,000, 9,000 tourist visas a day. This has led to a collapse of our tourism industry in the Philippines today. In 2019, in just half a year, we had at least 1 million Chinese tourists already in the Philippines. This year, it's only 75,000 up to this point in time. That has led the Department of Tourism to write 2 communications to the Department of Foreign Affairs demanding the increase of these visa quota for Chinese tourists. What is happening in the DFA that they are not releasing more visas? That is a very big question mark. It is a well-known fact that the Department of Foreign Affairs Secretary Manalo is an boy, an American boy, including his Undersecretary Bensurto. So these are already the effects, the negative effects, and maybe fatal effects for our tourism industry if this is not corrected. So the presence of these Americans and the dominance of the Americans that has come back again under the present administration of BBM is definitely causing tremendous negative effects on our nation. Tourism industry collapse is the second thing. Well, we are also witness to the continuing high prices of our oil and gas and our electricity. Again, this can be related to the American domination of our policies in the country. We are, for example, unable to buy heavily discounted Russian oil and gas for the country because of fear of the American sanctions. We now are beginning to see even worse impacts of the American presence in the country and domination of the country. We are now witness to very serious repression of the freedom of information, freedom of discussion, freedom of expression in our society. We have seen how the SMNI network has been shut down. And the target of the shutdown of the SMNI, of course, is the only powerful, the most powerful voice against the U.S. bases here, which is former President Duterte. Ostensibly, it is a shutdown of the SMNI network, but in reality, it is to shut down the broadcasts of former President Duterte, which has been consistent for the past 2 months in denouncing the negative impact and the perilous impact of the U.S. bases, U.S. EDCA bases in the Philippines. Well, the country is also being divided by the domination of the U.S. in the Philippines. We are now, even the presidential family, meaning the family of the president, is divided over this issue. Jaime Marcos is posing opposition to the presence of these bases. And the rest of the nation is also divided on this. Of course, President Duterte has said that has been presenting the danger of these bases to the country, and he has said on his SMNI TV show that magpapapako siya sa cross. He will have himself nailed to the cross if there is no war in our region that will devastate the Philippines, and that is why he has been campaigning, or at least expressing himself on this basis presence in the country. I'd like to end by just also finally exposing the blight that the U.S. infects us as a society in our academic community. Now, these voices, the academic voices in our society, such as people like Richard Daidarian of UP, Ateneo, and so on. People like Renato de Castro of De La Salle University. Antonio Contreras of De La Salle University. They're all associated with the strat-based ADRI, Albert de Rosario Institute. This think tank is linked with the CSIS, Center for Strategic and International Studies, the new CIA of the United States of America. And if you look at the funding, I had the PowerPoint, but we were not able to prepare it, showing that the CSIS is funded by the G7 governments, the imperialist governments, and the U.S. defense industry. Raytheon, yung Grumman, Lockheed Martin, and so on. Lobbying among think tanks is very normal and very natural, because even academics need a livelihood. But when it is the defense industry of the country, such as the United States of America and of course the NATO countries are the ones lobbying, I think every nation should be very wary and very careful. And this is what has happened to the Philippines. And it is accelerating. There are more and more academics that are attracted to these inducements from the Center for Strategic and International Studies. So the presence of the Americans is problematic not only because of the South China Sea issue, which they distort and explode out of proportion, but its ill effects are already spreading in our society, in our politics, in our academic community. That is my point in my discussion today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kamentong. We appreciate your insights on this very sensitive and very important topics of our day. Our next speaker is Adolfo Apaglinawan, otherwise known as Kado. He is a Filipino journalist, a geopolitical and political analyst and activist. He's the anchor of a radio program, Ang Maestro, The Unfinished Revolution, aired on Radio Pilipinas 1. He's the author of 2 best-selling books, A Problem for Every Solution and A No Vaccine for a Virus Called Racism. He is also the co-host of Opinion Ngayon TV show, formerly at Golden Nation Network. Let us welcome Kado for his opening statements.
Kamentong basically discussed policies that are heavily weighed on the executive department. I would like to devote my time for another branch of our government, the legislative. While serving as press attaché of our embassy in Washington, D.C., President Corazon Aquino also designated me as on a concurrent capacity, together with Ambassador to the United States, Emmanuel Pelaez, to the permanent Philippine mission to the United Nations in New York. So believe you me, if it's about the United Nations, I have it in the palm of my hands. Juan Miguel Zubiri, the Senate President, has confirmed the intellectual bankruptcy permeating within the walls of the Philippine Senate when he threw his support behind a proposal for the Philippines to elevate the United Nations General Assembly, the 2016 Permanent Court of Arbitration ruling. The Urban Dictionary defines intellectual bankruptcy as engaging no longer to debate issues in good faith, but instead to seek, to lie, distort, name call, target, and destroy with any means possible. Subiri leads an initial list of simpletons, including Francis Tolentino, Risa Hontiveros, and J.B. Ejercito, who obviously do not know how the United Nations work, but want to exacerbate a matter which I doubt they have even read about or understood. To start with, unlike a state parliament or Congress, the UN General Assembly is not a formal source of law, and all its resolutions retain strength and authority only of an opinion of states on a specific subject. Even the United States continue to refuse to treat the General Assembly resolutions as authoritative sources of international law. The General Assembly has remained a political body endowed with the advantages of open and uninhibited discussion, serving a valuable function as a forum for the expression of momentary indignation and deeply held sentiments. But its strengths as an international political body are also its weaknesses as a legislative body. If member states knew they would be bound by their votes, many resolutions would never be passed. Subiri, Tolentino, Hontiveros, and Ejercito got excited when 16 European Union countries recently expressed their support to the 2016 arbitral ruling. Immediately, Hontiveros issued a press release saying, by ignoring the growing consensus around the Philippine victory arbitral ruling, the Chinese government further isolates itself from the international community. What international community is she talking about? When in July 2016, the PCA ruling was released, 147 countries ignored it. 7, including Taiwan, opposed it. Another 33 countries acknowledged the ruling but did not call for compliance. The foregoing indicates Hontiveros is an ignoramus. What about the route through the UN judicial system? The role of the International Court of Justice is to settle, in accordance with international law, legal disputes submitted to it by states, and to give advisory opinions on legal questions referred to it by authorized United Nations organs and specialized agencies. But its competence is not compulsory for the UN member states, who remain free to accept or not to accept its jurisdiction on either a permanent or ad hoc basis. Article 94.1 of the UN Charter and Article 60 of its statute says, quote, the decisions of the ICJ are binding and final for the states and cannot be appealed. But Article 94.2 of the Charter qualifies the Security Council has the only authority at the request of the injured state to implement special measures to enforce a judgment rendered by the ICJ. The UN Security Council is charged with establishing peacekeeping operations, enacting international sanctions, authorizing military action, and it is the only UN body with the authority to enforce binding resolutions on member states. The Security Council has 15 members, but that cannot prevent or end a debate. But 5 of them are permanent members who have the power to veto any substantive resolution, allowing a permanent member to block its adoption and enforcement. What this means is that even if the UN General Assembly passes a resolution or the International Court of Justice issues a final judgment, if such is submitted to the Security Council, vetoes it, nothing will happen. Let us take up, as an example, Justice Antonio Carpio's favorite precedents in building a case against China at the United Nations. In 1984, the Republic of Nicaragua versus the United States of America was a case where the ICJ held that the U.S. had violated international law by supporting the Contras in their rebellion against the Sandinistas and by mining Nicaragua's harbors. The case was decided in favor of Nicaragua and against the United States, complete with the awarding of reparations. Nicaragua also won a non-binding resolution from the UN General Assembly. But what Carpio glosses over in citing this when he was debating in favor of the arbitral ruling is that the United States refused to participate in the proceedings, arguing that the ICJ lacked jurisdiction to hear the case. The Americans also vetoed enforcement of the judgment by the United Nations Security Council, being a permanent member, against the U.S., thereby preventing Nicaragua from obtaining any compensation. Pray tell me the difference between this and China's position on a mere arbitral ruling. What they prevent China from invoking state consent, they arrogate it upon themselves. With this anecdote as background, allow me to educate Subiri, Tolentino, Hontiveros, and Ejercito that China and its ally Russia are permanent members of the Security Council. What is also necessary mentioning here is that under UNCLOS, China has been elected to a seat in the International Tribunal of the Laws of the Seas, ITLOS, the compulsory arbitral mechanism of the treaty law for resolving disputes. If the UN and UNCLOS is a dead end insofar as bringing China to the General Assembly and the International Court of Justice, or for that matter, the Security Council and ITLOS, why are these nitwitted senators proposing we even go into that direction? Who stand to benefit from such a useless endeavor but the lawfare and propaganda war the United States has staged to demonize China? The Americans have, since the Commonwealth, ridden on the crest of the Filipinos' love for polemics and pointless disputations. We are a country of Mariteses and Marisols. We love to talk to death, and that's why our people are poor. The Philippine government still has to explain to the Filipino people how B.S. Aquino, no pun intended, that is for Benigno Simeon, not for anything else, and Albert de Rosario spent between 2013 and 2016 over 1 billion of the people's money, 350 million of which just went to the American and British lawyers to stage a mock arbitration framing China 9-dash line as having no legal basis. That arbitration was intended to cover up and regain Scarborough Shoals, how in their utter incompetence, Noynoy Aquino and Del Rosario lost the territory. The Chinese did not grab Scarborough Shoals from us. We surrendered control of the area to them after these two imbeciles ordered our ships to withdraw from the area for what turned out to be a miscommunication between Manila, our embassy in Washington, D.C., and the U.S. State Department. This is what happens when instead of talking to China directly, we hide behind the asses of our former colonial masters. So if we insist on acting as the American megaphone, shaming China, we can never recover control of the Scarborough Shoal except through war. Ironically, this is how the U.S. has goaded our naive leaders, including President Marcos Jr., into more bases under the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, making the Philippines their urgent listening post on Chinese activities and possibly their strategic launching pad for war against China in case something happens to Taiwan. But for those who have read UNCLOS and the arbitral ruling, you cannot miss that the Philippines, can we show the slide of the polygon, stands to lose more if we continue to be blindsided that the United States has framed both China's 9-dash line and the Kalayaan Island Group as standing in the way of America's unilateral FONOPs, as in freedom of navigation, operational resistance to excessive maritime claims. It is the same UNCLOS provisions that the arbitral ruling invoked to declare China's 9-dash line illegal that the panel invokes to declare our Kalayaan Island Group without basis in international law. Paragraph 574 of the arbitral ruling pointed out that the Philippines could not declare archipelagic baselines surrounding the Spratly Islands. The total area shown here is roughly 1.2 million square kilometers for the entire Philippines, consisting of 300 square kilometers of land, 680,000 kilometers of territorial and inland waters. And here you can see 230,000 square kilometers encompassed by the KIG. Next slide, please. If we lose the KIG, polygon or hexagon, as the arbitral panel ruled, we lose 19% of our territory. Is this what we want? But this is where Subiri and his kiss-ass gang is taking us. Thank you.
Thank you, Kado, for your very much needed crash course on international law. We hope our Philippine legislature will heed your appeals. Our next speaker is Professor Ana Rosario Malindog Uy. She is joining us via Zoom in China, finishing her doctorate degree in economics in Peking University. She's a cum laude graduate of political science at the University of the Philippines. She's a researcher, writer, academic, and consultant for various issues. She's a political and geopolitical analyst for SMNI News and vice president for External Affairs of the Asian Century Philippines Strategic Studies Institute. Let us welcome Professor Ana Malindog Uy, joining us from Zoom.
The photographers are requesting to stage the skit for the photo.
Okay.
All
All right. Professor Ana, hold on for a while. We will hold our skit. We have prepared a skit.
Okay,
No problem.
Actors can come forward. Okay.
I'd like to welcome again our media friends here joining us at UP Diliman.
Kaya bang mag-stage natin? Alam na po medyo na lang, boss. The camera can capture, no? The camera can capture sa Zoom. Kasya. I know what's best for you. I really know what's best for you. I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. Oh, my little brown man. I love you so much. This is my gift for you. I know what's best for you. I know what's best for you. I know what's best for you. Oh, this is America. Oh, my little brown man. How do you feel? Am I bringing you the best? Right? So are you happy? Of course we are happy. Because Uncle Sam, I know what's best for you. I know what's best for you. And I love you. Love you. Hindi ka! Hindi ka! Ito hindi! Edukasyon, hindi ka! Ekonomiya, hindi ka! Hindi ka!
Thank you very much for our very talented performers for giving us that incisive skit. Let us go back now to Professor Ana Malindog-Uy. Let us welcome her for her opening statements.
Um, am I, is it okay? Naririnig ako, right? Okay. Okay na, no? Okay ang audio ko? Okay, audio, no? I'll start. Okay, I'll start. Friends and colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, to my co-panel of speakers, a pleasant morning to all. Thank you for participating and attending this forum. I would like also to extend my heartfelt thanks to the media, to our media friends for coming and also for covering this media forum. As part of the organizer, I would like to extend as well my heartfelt gratitude to everyone, again, for attending this forum. One of the important topics assigned to me is to talk about briefly about the Global Security Initiative proposed by Chinese President Xi Jinping. So let me start with that, and then probably I will touch a little on some of the important issues that the Asia-Pacific region, ASEAN, and even, of course, the Philippines at the moment are faced with. So to start, China's proposed Global Security Initiative is a framework for maintaining and sustaining peace across the globe. GSI adheres to the concept of common, comprehensive, cooperative, and sustainable security. It is advocating a new path to security that features dialogue over confrontation, partnership over alliance, and win-win cooperation over zero-sum game. I think the GSI principles are important if the world is to maintain and sustain peace across the world. Reading through and trying to understand China's proposed global security initiative, the way I see it from my own perspective, from my vantage point, it is an approach toward conflict resolution and peace promotion, which is quite practical and doable in many ways, precisely because it prescribes a sense of pragmatism needed and the necessary principles through which peace, security, and development could be achieved and secured in the wider Asian region and beyond. For instance, one of its fundamental principles, or one of the fundamental principles of GSI is the respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity of all countries. This is quite a basic and fundamental tenets and principles in international relations and how states are expected to relate with one another. This basically means non-interference in the internal affairs of a nation state. If states will genuinely respect this principle, then we'll be able to reduce tensions and conflicts across the globe. As you can see, the most of interstate conflicts since time immemorial have something to do with the disrespect of this principle. The other GSI principles which are equally important include respecting the purpose and principles of the United Nations Charter, which is necessary since the UN Charter is akin to a customary international law that member countries of the UN must adhere and respect. Peaceful resolving of differences and dispute between countries is important for countries not to resort to force or military action to resolve dispute and conflict. That's one of the principles as well of the GSI. The other, another principle is the and upholding indivisibility of security, or the interrelatedness of non-traditional security issue and traditional security issues. This is also important precisely because security issues nowadays are not just about traditional security issues like territorial integrity and sovereignty issues, but a lot of them are non-traditional, or what you call human security related issues that affects the welfare and security of countries and peoples. And one, to give you an example, that would include climate change, food security, and many others. What I am saying is, given that we live in an ever volatile and challenging world order, the Global Security Initiative, alongside its principles and prescription, could serve as a guiding rods against instability and conflict, and could guide countries to work and cooperate together towards sustainable peace, stability, and development in Asia and the world at large. On another note, the Philippines is the second largest archipelagic country in the world. It is very wealthy in marine resources, but its potential for marine economic development has yet to be fully achieved. Since the Duterte administration, the country has created favorable environment for international cooperation on key issues, particularly on the disputed South China Sea region. Former President Duterte's China-friendly stand had set the stage for mending ties and have been frayed by festering maritime sovereignty dispute, providing opportunities for the maritime economic development of both countries. In recent years, with the joint efforts of China and the Philippines, the two countries have significantly improved bilateral relations and maintained strong cooperation in trade and investment. For example, China has become the Philippines' top trading partner, top source of imports, third largest export destination, and second or top 5 source of foreign investments. Under the presidency of Ferdinand Marcos Jr., after he won the election on May 9, 2022, the expectation of many, including myself, is that cooperation between the two countries will remain, and economic cooperation and trade between the two countries are expected to grow. However, the current administration under the leadership of President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. seems to be deviating from the foreign policy of his predecessor and has pivoted or has the tendencies to pivot to the United States. Hence, this foreign policy trajectory has created some critical challenges to the bilateral relation of the Philippines and China, politically speaking, particularly in managing the dispute in the contested waters of the South China Sea, and even to a greater extent on the Taiwan issue or the Taiwan question because of the EDCA basis. And we should take note of the fact that out of the 4 additional EDCA sites that has been agreed between the United States and the Philippines, 3 of them are facing or near Taiwan. So that is creating some kind of tension between the two countries, politically speaking, though I would admit that the economic cooperation between the two countries are still, at the moment, is stable thus far. Nevertheless, moving forward, there are practical ways both sides could pursue win-win cooperation despite differences and conflict of interest in the South China Sea. First is to pursue the possible joint oil and gas exploration and cooperation between the two countries by respecting whatever consensus has already been reached. Second is pursue joint fishery management and marine environmental protection in the South China Sea as well. Furthermore, another area, this kind of endeavor can strike collaboration and partnership and can actually, to a greater extent, build some kind of confidence and trust between two parties. The potential of China-Philippine fishery cooperation is huge and promising. The two countries should also cooperate on marine environmental protection. Other essential part of marine economic cooperation should not be neglected as well. I think the third one is both sides should maximize bilateral consultative mechanism and multilateral mechanism through the ASEAN level without affecting two countries' respective standpoints on sovereign and territorial issues of the South China Sea. Also, bilateral negotiation, especially when you talk about the South China Sea, is also important. So it should be both. If this government is listening, you should have both, pursue both avenues in trying to resolve and reduce the tension in the South China Sea, bilaterally and multilaterally within the ambit of ASEAN. Third is to focus on substantive issues rather than on politics. I think that is something that I want to emphasize. No, substantive issues, not politics, or not muddling the issue too much. Last but not the least is to take a positive attitude and outlook in carrying out constructive dialogue with strategic vision to promote development cooperation project and establish a strategic partnership with China and collaborate on practical solutions to the South China Sea disputes, which include, again, possible joint oil and gas exploration and on gas resources and fishing resources that, the South China Sea has abundant resources in this kind of maritime resources, coupled with continued shared infrastructure and coordinated investments. In addition to trade and economic cooperation, maritime law enforcement cooperation is another key to regional and global maritime governance. Maritime law enforcement cooperation is of extreme value for both countries to ensure maritime security, facilitate freedom of commerce, protect the ocean's resources, and advance prosperity. In 2016, despite the decision of the Arbitral Tribunal ruling on the South China Sea, both China and the Philippines agreed to leave aside the maritime dispute and focus on strengthening economic development over the ocean. The MOU was signed between China's Coast Guard and the Philippine Coast Guard to establish the Joint Commission on Maritime Police Cooperation. Since then, the China-Philippine Maritime Law Enforcement Cooperation has achieved pragmatic outcomes, but there is still, of course, room for improvement, especially in this administration. Taken as a whole, all of this, the basic proposition that what I'm saying is we have to focus, I think, as a country and put our energy on win-win strategy, cooperation, and a solution of turning the dilemma, especially in the South China Sea, into an opportunity that engenders tangible benefits and foster a better and progressive future for all Filipinos and Chinese, rather than the zero-sum game or a winner-takes-all approach that the Americans are trying to put us into. I don't think that's the way forward for this country, for our country. That would lead us to something that we don't want to be into. So that is something that all Filipinos, I think, has to think about and reflect on, especially the current administration. I hope both sides can pursue to achieve mutual beneficial and win-win cooperation. I hope the Chinese and the Philippine governments will persevere in making all this happen for the benefits of the Filipinos and the Chinese people. On a regional level, since I'm also working at a more regional level in the ASEAN and Asia Pacific, I think one of the many ways to secure peace and stability in the ASEAN and the wider Asia Pacific region is for countries to focus more on economic cooperation and development and less on geopolitics and geopolitical issues that might cause division between and among Asian countries. Another important consideration is for countries in the Asia Pacific region not to succumb to the enticement of the United States for Asian countries to be part and parcel of US-sponsored bloc or small group of geopolitics like AUKUS or Quad, for I think this is divisive and dangerous. Furthermore, countries in Asia should resolve conflict and dispute peacefully and diplomatically with lots of pragmatism within the ambit of multilateralism and respect for international laws. Most importantly, countries in Asia should respect each other's sovereignty and territorial integrity and must forge solid cooperation and strong political will to persevere and to preserve peace and stability in the region despite external interference from a superpower and its allies. I think this is the way to go if Asians like us want to have peace and stability in the Asia-Pacific region and in the Southeast Asian region. For now, that is my intervention and in this media forum. Thank you so much for the opportunity and have a pleasant morning to all. Back to you, moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ana Malindog-Uy, for your important introduction for the Global Security Initiative. Thank you for reminding us that the future of Asia-Pacific countries must be decided by Asian Pacific countries alone. Last but not the least, we welcome a distinguished domestic politics and geopolitics expert and foreign policy analyst, Ms. Sas Rogando Sasot. She is the author of a book entitled A Lighthouse Before a Troubled Sea, Essays on the South China Sea Conflict. She is a foreign policy analyst for Integrated Development Studies Institute. She earned her master's degree in international relations at the Leiden University in the Netherlands. She is a program anchor for Statecraft TV show at SMNI News Channel, and she recently exposed the Department of Tourism's Love the Philippines campaign for using stock footage, not even from the Philippines. Let us welcome Ms. Sas Rogando Sasot for her opening statements.
Ano ako ngayon? Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Ano ako ngayon? Maestra mode ako. Pero paano ba tanggalin yung nandito sa kanan? Ayan. Naririnig naman ako. Naririnig niyo naman ako, no? Loud and clear. Okay, since pang ilang years na ba to? 7th year anniversary ng pag-really 8th year or 7? 7, favorite number to ni Bongbong. 7th year anniversary ng South China Sea Arbitration decision. Yun din yung anniversary ko, Kamentong, ng pagiging vlogger. Kasi kaya naman ako sumikat because of the South China Sea Arbitration. Dahil ako lang naman yung nagsasalitang maingay noong 2016 na may lakas ng loob at kinokontra yung official line ng gobyerno. So, itong presentation na ito para lang klaruhin ang iba't ibang bagay tungkol sa South China Sea Arbitration. Ililimit ko lang sa 5. Mas marami pa actually ito sa 5 pero wala naman tayong buong araw para i-discuss yung lahat ng kasinungalingan tungkol dito sa South China Sea Arbitration na to. So, let's start. Okay. Paano ba to? Paano ba ako maglilipat? Paano ba ako maglilipat ng... So, dapat... Hindi nakaano ko eh. Ayan. Okay. View slide. Okay. So, unang-una, the South China Sea Arbitration is not about the West Philippine Sea. It's not about the West Philippine Sea. It never validated that there is such a thing as a West Philippine Sea. So, yung mga sinasabi nila na atin ito, yung the West Philippine Sea atin ito, tapos inaangkla nila sa South China Sea Arbitration, walang katotohanan yon. Walang nakalagay sa South China Sea Arbitration, sa 501 pages ng South China Sea Arbitration, na merong West Philippine Sea na tinatawag at ito ay sa Pilipinas. It doesn't exist. So it's a figment of someone's hallucination, delusion, and just deliberate lie. It doesn't exist. So if there is a mother of fake news, of all fake news in the last 12 years in the Philippines, this is it. Okay? So bakit this is not about West Philippine Sea? Ang claim kasi ng gobyerno natin, we have a territory called the West Philippine Sea. But the West Philippine Sea doesn't exist. So ano yung kiniklaim mo na territory? It doesn't exist. You just created it inside your mind. It's just something that we keep on repeating inside our country, but it doesn't exist internationally. Nobody knows where the West Philippine Sea is. It's not registered in the hydrographic international hydrographic charts kasi you need to send amendments to the IHO, International Hydrographic Organization, in order to register the new names of the seas or whatever. There's no such thing as West Philippine Sea internationally. Number 2, kaya hindi ito about the West Philippine Sea. Kasi the South China Sea Arbitration decision is not about territorial sovereignty. It has been very clear from the very start. The Philippines has been very clear from the very start that the arbitration proceedings is not about territorial sovereignty. Ergo, it has nothing to do with the territorial integrity of the Philippines. Because something can only be about your territorial integrity if the issue is about your territorial sovereignty. Kaya nga yung sinabi ni Kaado kanina na yung about yung gusto ni Senator Hontiveros et al. Na mag-send ng UN resolution, inaangkla nila yung UN resolution na yon sa territorial integrity issue. But you cannot have a territorial integrity issue sa West Philippine Sea because the West Philippine Sea is not part of your territory. And this brings me to my academic discussion. Okay. Okay. So, ito kasi yung hindi naiintindihan ng mga tao. Okay? So, what is territory? Okay? Mag-uumpisa tayo sa katubigan. Kung nakikita niyo dyan, pwede ba akong pumunta doon para... Okay, so what is territory? Okay? So ito yung originally territory only includes terra. You know, it comes from the word its root word is terra, which means land. So originally, you know, territory only involves land. In Asia for a long time, territory doesn't include the sea. And then in Europe, you know, every problem in the world comes from Europe. The Europeans started to navigate the world under the idea that God divided the world among them, especially between the Portuguese and the Spanish. Okay, that's the origin of the Treaty of Tordesillas, etc. So the Pope divided the world between the Spanish and the Portuguese. You know, okay, kayo, the Spanish, sa inyo yung, I don't know kung ano yung exact division, no? Kung yung west sa Spain and then yung the east is for the Portuguese. I think that's the, So that's what they did. From that moment, I think it was in the 15th century, the world is owned by the Spaniards and the Portuguese. Everything. Hindi pa nila nakikita yung lugar, kanila na yon. Okay? So everything in the world is theirs. So they started to navigate to Asia. The Portuguese was the first naval power that went to Asia. And then the Portuguese arrived in a different world order, so different from the world order of the Europeans. Because in Asia, trade was flourishing. It was the richest region in the world for a very, very long time. Europe was so poor. You know, they're actually very uncivilized. They were nothing compared to Asia. So the Portuguese arrived with their armed ships. And it was unheard of in Asia for a very long time that you would have a navy. Nobody thought about it, you know, for a very, very long time. The Chinese built the biggest armada naval ship in I think in history, and then they actually forgot about it because they don't find it useful, you know. So the Portuguese arrived with their armed ships. They destroyed the peace in the region. They introduced naval warfare, etc., until they encountered the Dutch in the state near Strait Malacca. So what did the Dutch do? They actually stole the bounty of the Portuguese ship. And in order to justify what the Dutch did, Hugo Grotius, you know, the patron saint of international, who kept being referred to by Carpio et al., and who happens to be some sort of a legal luminary in my university in the Netherlands. He was the lawyer who actually introduced the idea of the free and open seas. But he did it in order to justify the right of the Dutch to be in an area which was supposed to be owned by the Portuguese. So yun lang yun. So naging lawyer si Hugo Grotius ng mga pirates, and then they introduced the idea of the free and open seas. But the British didn't like the idea. They said, no, we want a part of the sea to be part of the territory of the country. So for a very long time, there's two opposing ideas in Europe. One is that you cannot own any portion of the sea, and then the other one you can. So the tension between mare liberum and mare clausum. So for the British, you can. For the Dutch, you cannot. So now, the Asians who didn't care about this idea suddenly cared about this. And it has now become the leading ideas that we have about the sea. So now, under UNCLOS, it combined the idea of the free ocean and that you can own a portion of the sea. Okay? So, according to UNCLOS, the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, the part of the sea that is part of your territory is 12 nautical miles from your baseline. So, this is it. That's your territory. So it has to be treated as if it is land. 12 nautical miles from the baseline. After 12 nautical miles, that's no longer part of your territory. So itong sina Carpio et al., well, actually Carpio is aware of this. Pero yung mga marionettes and etc., they kept on saying na hanggang dito teritoryo mo natin. Kasi it has no basis. No, parang nag-imbento tayo ng konsepto sa international law. It has no basis. Pakihawak lang sa dali. Ililipat ko. Okay. So saan ngayon nagtatapos ang teritoryo ng Pilipinas? And this is very important to emphasize kasi I don't think Filipinos know where the territory of the Philippines end. So this is actually the mapping of the territory of the Philippines according to the archipelagic baseline law. Okay? So, of course, you have to define your baseline para malaman mo yung iyong territorial sea. So, itong first line na ito, I think this is violet or indigo. This is the baseline of the Philippines. Yang pink na yan, the second line, that's the extent of our territorial sea. So, our territory ends there. Now, asan yung tinatawag na Kalayaan Island Group? It's outside the territorial sea of the Philippines. So ngayon, kaya hindi ko maintindihan pag sinasabing, we need to defend our territory. Nasaan ba yung mga sinasabi ninyong invasion? Nandito ba? Nasa labas. So what is being invaded? So that's another lie that's being implanted on us, especially by the Americans, huh? Because maybe the Americans wanted us to forget that they are actually the ones who invaded us and stole 7,107 islands, and they haven't even paid us any reparation for their theft. And then when they returned what they stole, they called it Friendship Day. Can you imagine? We celebrate it as Friendship Day. Kagaguhan. Di ba? Ganyan gago ng mga Amerikano. Una, ninakaw nila. Tapos, nung umalma yung mga ancestors natin, pinagpapatay nila. Almost 1 million. And then, sinabi nila, this is for your own good. Kaya tama yung skit dito. Sabi nila, this is for your own good. And then, finally, nung ginrant nila yung Independence Day, we celebrate it as Friendship Day. So parang may akyat bahay na pumunta sa bahay mo, ninakaw yung bahay mo, pinatay lahat ng pamilya mo, tapos nung ibinalik yung bahay mo, nag-request pa na gagawin pa rin naming operational base yung bahay mo para sa aming krimen. Pero This is an act of friendship. Di ba? Ewan ko kung bakit tayo ganun kagago. Anyway, balik tayo dito. So ito yung, wala dito. Okay? This part is not our territory. Nobody believes in the world that it is part of our territory, even the United States. That's why the MDT of the United States, when they invoke it on issues of West Philippine Sea, they only say that the MDT will be activated if vessels, ships, etc. of the Philippines were attacked. Yun ang kanilang sinasabi. Hindi nila sinasabi, di ba, na if China invades Pag-asa Island, the MDT will be activated. No, they will never say that because the MDT, when it was negotiated in the 1950s, the territory of the Philippines only ends here. Actually, in the there's a trench here, Palawan Trench. It only ends there. Yung Kalayaan Island Group, it's a 1978 invention. So can you imagine an MDT in the 1950s considering na ang territory ng Pilipinas doon doesn't include anything that we are now claiming as territory will be suddenly be applicable? Sino nakaisip nitong mga ganitong konsepto? So that's the territory of the Philippines. That's it. Next slide. So, asan ba ako? So, third, the South China Sea Arbitration did not resolve the territorial dispute between the Philippines and China. Never. And when I say China, I'm including the People's Republic of China and the Republic of China. So, the Beijing and Taipei factions of one China. And of course, our territorial dispute with Vietnam and Malaysia. So kaya yung sinasabi nila na because of the South China Sea Arbitration, atin na ang West Philippine Sea. Paano mo nga masasabi yon? It didn't resolve the territorial dispute. That is the core of our issue, our territorial dispute. Everything flows from the territorial dispute. If the territorial dispute is unresolved, everything else is unresolved. So, to demonstrate this, paki-next nga. This is the division of territorial holdings of the different countries na nag-aaway-away dito. So, Vietnam has 20. Philippines has 8. People's Republic of China has 8. Malaysia has 3. And then ROC, Taiwan, has 1. So, yung Pag-asa Island na parating ulit-ulit na sinasabi, it's actually outside our exclusive economic zone. Ngayon, ang dami nating kaaway. No? Hindi lang naman isa. Actually, ang pinaka kung tinuturing natin tong teritoryo natin to, actually, we have to forget about it already. You know, because our country doesn't have effective occupation of most of the features of the Kalayaan Island Group. Kung gusto mo kaawayin yung China, Malaysia, etc. Kaya yung sinasabi nila na EDCA will be a deterrent against China, ginagago lang tayo ng United States. Isang malaking paggagago yan. At ito ay nire-repeat ng ating gobyerno. Mali yan. Kasi noong nagkaroon ng 20 ang Vietnam, nung nagkaroon ng 8 ang China, may permanent bases ang United States sa Pilipinas. So ibig nilang sabihin, yung permanent military bases ng Amerika na pinakamalaki sa mundo nung panahon, di ba, it was the largest in the world, wasn't able to stop Vietnam. And now, this government is convincing us that EDCA, which they say is not really a military base, can actually stop China. Ano pa bang i-stop? Nakuha na nga eh. They're already like occupying everything. Most of the features that we are complaining about. It's already occupied by foreign countries. So there's really nothing to defend, to acquire anymore. It's already being occupied by others. Kaya nga, I don't know if you've read the news recently that Vietnam is now beefing up its militarization of its occupied features. Why? Because of the Philippines. Kasi ang United States, syempre matatakot yung Vietnam, no? Syempre ikaw ang Pilipinas, sino bang uuna mong kakantiin? Yung mas malakas o yung mas mahina? Of course, it created a tension. No? Syempre mag-aano ang Vietnam na, well, kung kaya mong gawin yan sa China, pwede mo rin sa akin gawin. So it actually escalated the tension in this region. Ito yung ginagawa ng United States. And that is something na ayaw nilang sabihin. Diba, sabi nila, EDCA will deter China from bullying. That was how they sold it in January. And then June, they have a new news. There's more bullying by China. Pero wait lang. Di ba nung January sinabi nyo, i-deter yung bullying? Now, after several months, you are now telling us, after giving 4 more EDCA sites to the Americans, there's more bullying? Kasi baka naman bawat region ng Pilipinas may EDCA sites sa ginagawa nung yan. Kasi di ba ganun binibenta? More EDCA sites will deter Chinese bullying. And then, may balita ka after several months na there is an increasing bullying of China. So it means your solution doesn't work. And why aren't they admitting that their solution doesn't work? Because they're clearly lying of the real reason why there are additional EDCA sites. And And that real reason is, of course, we know already, no? It's really for Taiwan. Okay, just to demonstrate the stupidity of our government, okay? Ang ano nila, China has now military base in our EEZ, etc. Ganyan. Malaysia has offshore military bases. And all of their offshore military bases, 5 of them, are in our EEZ. So what are they? Station Lima, which is in Swallow Reef, Station Uniform in Ardasier Reef, Station Mike in Mariveles Reef, is Station Sierra in Erica Reef, Station Papa, Investigator Shoal, or also known as Pawikan. So merong 5 offshore military bases ng Malaysia, and it's in our EEZ. So why are we not complaining about it? So bakit even Vietnam has a military base in our EEZ. Taiwan has the biggest naval base in the South China Sea. Actually belongs to Taiwan. It's in the Taiping Island. Why are we not complaining about it? Why suddenly we have to be threatened by China? Because the United States is threatened by China. Diba? Bigla na lang nagkaroon ng... Sumasabay kasi tayo sa agos ni Kuya ni big white brother, you know? Kung matreten siya, matreten din tayo. So, Malaysia has 5 military bases in our EEZ. We don't complain about it. Why? Is it because we're not threatened by Malaysia? But I thought we want Sabah. So if you want Sabah, why are you not threatened that there are offshore military bases of Malaysia in our EEZ that's even near Palawan? So ano yung rationale? Kaya nga, when you look at this issue deeper, you would finally recognize, I think it would be difficult not to say na, niloloko lang tayo ng gobyerno natin paulit-ulit at lalo na ng Amerika. Next. Okay, number 4. Arbitration decisions are only binding between the parties involved. Okay? Not applicable to Vietnam, Malaysia, of course. And Taiwan, ROC, rejects the South China Sea arbitration. Remember, Taiwan, ROC, and the PRC have the same claim because the basis of the claim of Beijing is from the ROC. It was the ROC who created it in the 1930s, the 9-dash line. So hindi siya binding, no? It's not binding out. Ganun ang arbitration. It's not binding outside the two of you. China rejects it, so it's only binding to us. So nobody cares. You know, kaya yung sinasabi ng Amerika, we will enforce, we will implement. Kanino nyo i-implement? Diba kanino nyo i-implement? Binding lang naman yan sa Pilipinas saka sa China. China doesn't want it. So it's only binding to us. Next. And finally, nabanggit ni Sir yung 9-dash line. According to South China Sea arbitration, China cannot claim maritime rights on the basis of 9-dash line. But, okay, big but, wag mo na. But, okay, pwede ba magsulat dito? Itong 9-dash line na yan, how many times have you ever heard China refer to 9-dash line in its statements?
0.
Never. Because this is American propaganda. You will never ever hear China refer na, we will claim everything in the 9-dash line. Never. Actually, China already submitted the limits of its territorial sea in the United Nations Secretariat a long time ago. And it doesn't include the entire South China Sea. So where exactly did this come from? This comes from the United States. And then we keep on repeating it. But when you look at the actual statements of China, it doesn't say na the basis of our claim is the 9-dash line. It's incorrect. Because kaya nilagay ko ditong but, okay? So the South China Sea arbitration said na China cannot claim maritime rights on the basis of the 9-dash line. Totoo. Hindi rin naman sila nakiklaim na maritime rights based on the 9-dash line eh. But, paragraph 272 of the decision states, ito, basahin ko muna verbatimly, saka ko explain. Finally, because the tribunal considers the question of historic rights with respect to maritime areas to be entirely distinct from that of historic rights to land, the tribunal considers it opportune to note that certain claims remain unaffected by this decision. In particular, the tribunal emphasizes that nothing in this award should be understood to comment in any way on China's historic claim to the islands of the South China Sea. Nor does the tribunal's decision that a claim of historic rights to living and non-living resources is not compatible with the convention limit China's ability to claim maritime zones in accordance with the convention on the basis of such islands. Okay, it's such a mouthful. Ano ibig sabihin nun? Can we go back to the map? So ano ibig sabihin nito?
Map.
Yeah, yung may mga claims.
Yan.
The next one. Yes. Okay. So ano ibig sabihin nun? China, just like Vietnam, claims everything. Okay? So ibig sabihin, Walang karapatan ng China mag-claim ng maritime rights on the basis of the 9-dash line. But the decision says na nothing in the word should be interpreted to mean na walang karapatan ng China to claim historic rights on the basis of the islands themselves. Nagets niyo ba yung difference? Okay? So, ibig sabihin, hindi tapos. Hindi na-resolve. Okay? Kaya, wala yung 9-dash line, but the 9-dash line is ghost, fiction. But the claim of China as well as Vietnam is based on historic occupation or whatever of the islands themselves. So ngayon, yung maritime rights na pwedeng makuha ng China is not on the basis of 9-dash line, but on the basis of the maritime entitlements of the features. Okay, dito na nagkatalo. Kasi the Philippines, everyone, before the China Sea arbitration decision, claims this as an archipelago. Ibig sabihin, it's a unit. Okay? Unit. So, pwedeng pakitanggal mo na itong para makita nila. So it's a hindi pakitanggal yung So it's a unit. So ano ibig sabihin yan? Okay? So, let's say ito yung mga individual features, okay? Now, if it is an archipelago, it is one unit. Okay, like the Philippines, okay? We are one unit. So we can draw a baseline all over all our islands and determine our maritime entitlement from that baseline. Are you following me? Now, Marcos Sr. considered our claim over an archipelago. So the KIG is an archipelago. So it's a unit, one unit. China's claim is Nansha Island is an archipelago. Vietnam's claim, ano bang tawag ng Trong Sa, Vietnam, archipelago. So lahat tayo, kiniklaim natin na iisa lang yung unit na yan. So why is this important? Because under international law, if it is a single unit, the fate of the principal features determine everything. So in terms of defense, I only need to occupy the principal feature and then that would determine the fate of the rest. Parang ang Pilipinas, if someone invades us, they just need to invade key areas. And then that would determine the fate of the entire Philippines because it is a unit. South China Sea arbitration decision, hindi na siya unit. So, it's no longer a unit. No, you cannot so Marcos Sr.'s claim, yung PD 1596, I believe it's PD 1596, is not compatible with the South China Sea arbitration. Because PD 1596 is based on the idea that the KIG is an archipelago. The South China Sea arbitration says, no, this is not an archipelago. So ngayon, dahil hindi siya archipelago, ang maritime entitlement is no longer gonna be from the baseline of the entire unit, but from the individual features. Nagigets yun na. So kaya yung South China Sea arbitration, meron siyang ang dami-daming explanation kung anong status ng bawat feature under UNCLOS. Island ba yan? Rock ba yan? LTE ba yan? High tide elevation? Kasi all those features have different maritime entitlements. Ngayon, ang ginawa pa ng South China Sea arbitration, wala ditong islands. So all of them yung mga LTE, yung mga high tide elevation, most of them are just rocks. So ibig sabihin, wala na. I can't see why nangyari. Wala na to. Yung ano ni Marcos Senior, wala na. Hindi na siya islands. Bato na lang siya. So, yung Pag-asa Island, that's not Pag-asa. That's not an island under international law. If we're going to subscribe, if we're going to accept the South Chinese arbitration, so those people are just living on a rock.
So, Sas, one important question at this point. Tinatanggap ng Philippine government yung arbitration. But China is not accepting it.
Vietnam is not accepting it as well.
So China can maintain its position that it's an archipelago.
Yes, just like Vietnam.
But Pilipinas can
no longer maintain. Nagets niyo ba kung bakit kagaguhan to? So ngayon, di ba, noong archipelago, binura ng mga Amerikano kasi sila rin ang so ibig sabihin nito, dati noong Marcos Senior time, we only need go to Pag-asa kasi malaki yung Pag-asa eh. Go to several and then we defend everything. Dahil hindi na siya archipelago. You need to defend individually.
So,
from our side.
Sinisuisin natin ang kaso natin.
Oo. So you need to defend individually. Eh kasi hindi siya archipelago eh. So ilan yun? 20. So yung 20 ng Vietnam, para masabi mong sa iyan, you need to take individually. Sabi ko, it's impossible na tatanggapin nyo yan. Pag tinanggap nyo yan, you have to change our idea of defending the KIG. Because during the time of Marcos Sr., alam mo yung ginagawa niya, you only need to occupy certain features, the principal features, in order to defend everything. Ngayon, Vietnam and China consider it as an archipelago. Kaya sila, they consider merong baseline all over it. And they claim maritime entitlements from that baseline. That's why China, you can see China going to the different areas because that's a way to defend their claim.
So, yung pili ni Marcos, bination sa archipelagic doctrine.
Yes.
The 200 mile limit. Hindi bination sa tinatawag na archipelago decision. Hindi yun ang base. Kasi ang 200 mile limit, sakop ang kalayaan, part of the Philippine territory. Yun ang base dyan. So, yung ginawa ni Marcos yan, impliedly, na-question ang right ng Malaysia na occupy ng territory dyan sa Kalayaan. Kasi hindi sila adjacent sa 200 mile limit. Wala yung Malaysia. Malaysia, pinanganak lang ng 1994. Eh, nung pinanganak ng 1994, wala pa silang lugar doon. Pwede sila mag-claim sa 200 mile limit, diretso ba? Sa territory. Hindi pa wala sila. Parang bonus lang sila.
Pero wala rin PD 5096. We cannot maintain PD 5096 and accept the South China Sea arbitration at the same time. It's impossible. Yeah.
Hindi tayo nag-ratify sa arbitration. Hindi natin nalambol yan kasi hindi nililimunan sa China.
Yeah, exactly. Pero that's the thing po eh na I think they never realize what they are doing or the consequence of what they were doing. So ngayon, it's either the Philippines reject the South China Sea arbitration, which would actually embarrassing.
Because our lawyers were not Filipinos. They were Americans and British.
They have a different interest.
Sa isip nila yung KIG.
Yes. Kaya ang ano nila, kaya yung sinasabi nila na walang karapatan yung China magpunta dyan. Actually, that's very incorrect. Kasi it is still a disputed area. So if it's a territorial contest, you would do everything in order to assert your territorial claim. So that's the way that the China would do it. They would actually have more presence. And there's nothing illegal about it.
And since Pagasa is 308 nautical miles from Palawan, you cannot go to Pagasa without meeting a single Chinese ship
Yes.
because it's lampas na doon sa 200 nautical miles.
Ano nga yun? Even Vietnamese, there are a lot of Vietnamese ships there. Of course, and there's of course the naval base of Taiwan.
No bullying. There is just coexistence of ships there.
Actually, what's happening, kasi ang ano kasi nila, there's bullying. Well, there is bullying if they are in our territory. But they're not in our territory. They are in a disputed area. So what's happening here is not bullying. There is a wrestling. There is a wrestling. Na outmaneuver ka. Can you imagine si Pacquiao nagrereklamo, binubuli siya ng nakakasapak sa kanya ng mas maano. That's preposterous. Pero kasi nga, ang mga Pilipino, gustong-gusto nila yung drama na, alam mo yun, nabubuli. Hindi ka nabubuli. Wala ka lang talagang lakas na makipag-agawan. And you are just, parang you are spending all your resources here. Meanwhile, the eastern part of the Philippines, na wala tayong territorial dispute, we're not developing. Kasi, bakit tayo nagkakaganito? It's because of the Americans. There's nothing else that we can say. Di ba yung Benham rice? Nobody is even disputing our Benham rice claim. And we're not even doing anything in order to develop the Benham rice.
Kaya atin na yun.
Yeah.
By UN award.
Wala nga it's never disputed by anyone, etc. And we're not doing anything. And then gusto natin dito tayo na parang it doesn't make any sense.
Sabi ng hindi ko alam kung ano na kaya sa Pilipino. In-include niya Taiwan sa joint venture agreement. Sabi niya, wala ka yan. Kaya nasira doon si Indonesia.
Yeah, pero I think kasi may gusto mag-develop din ng US-based venom rice. Anyway, so ngayon, so to conclude, yung binagdidiwang nilang South China Sea arbitration, it actually created more trouble for the Philippines than resolved anything. So, in short, we actually paid for more trouble for our countries rather than resolve anything. Kaya nga this will never fly in the United Nations. Actually, perhaps the BBM administration should actually allow Ontiveros to do her thing so that she would be embarrassed internationally, na parang makuha na nila yung gusto nila kasi parang the South Chinese arbitration is not embarrassing enough for them. They want more embarrassment, and I think they should be given that if that's what they want. So thank you po, and next na tayo.
Thank you, Ms. Rogando Sasso, for giving us that brilliant crash course on territorial claims and exposing the sham arbitral ruling. We appreciate your insights very much. Let us hope that our government heed your appeals and your important documented research.
I just want to announce that there's lunch, garlic rice and drinks.
Yes, there's lunch for everyone, garlic rice and drinks for everyone here. Thank you again to all our media friends who participated here in UP.
I'm going to ask because we need to distribute my card kasi po, excuse me, sabi ko, gusto ko ready. Bakit ba pinag-aasaya nila siya? Sabi mo din ako sa nakabayo. Hindi naman nakuha ng jurisdiction ng arbitration na yun. Hindi naman Chile. Pinapansin. Sandali, before, sa likod po ng calling card ko may QR code. So when you, can you explain that QR code?
Yeah, the QR code will make scan for the latest articles. Other contact.
Yeah.
And then like today to time. So that's a YouTube Facebook.
Yung
Feel free
mga articles mo, pwede namin
download
So isasama din natin yung mga articles ni sa Lugando doon sa QR code na yun. So it's continuously updated if you want to get the latest articles on this issue. Yeah, so anyway, questions na sa inyo sa audience?
Any questions from the media? Please introduce yourself and where your network is.
Consider office po from UK Philippines. First question po.
Yes.
What is your reaction po dun sa statement ng mga opisyalis ng Pilipinas na walang kinalaman yung mga military exercises between US and Philippine military sa allegedly na pangharas po ng Chinese Coast Guard sa mga Philippine Coast Guard natin or Chinese vessels po?
Okay, I think sinong nagbitaw ng statement na yan?
From military,
I think the military should should stop this dilly-dallying. Linawin naman, ang gulo-gulo nila na parang sabi nila yung military exercise nila ay walang kinalaman sa harassment daw ng China. So what is it for? So what is their military exercise for? What are they preparing for? Who is the enemy of the Philippines? Di ba? Well, is it for the CPP and PA? Ilan na lang ata ang CPP? Ilan na lang ata ang NPA sa Pilipinas, no? Na parang, actually, it can also already be devolved into a police problem. yung NPA. So who is the military exercise for? Military exercise for? Which war are they preparing for? We only know what one war that is possible to be fought in our region, and it is the war between China and the Philippines. So sino ba? Yun yung ano dito na on one hand, I think it's the statement is giving us hope that they are finally realizing na what they are doing is bad for our country. Kasi if they really believe that they would like to fight China head on, they could easily say that this is in preparation for Chinese invasion and aggression or whatever. But now they are now saying that has nothing to do with it. Then maybe they should clarify, what is it about then? Why are you why do you have these military exercises? Because if you just want our soldiers to be trained, well, why don't you just send them to the United States and be trained there? Obviously, it is the Americans who want to be trained in the Philippines so that they would know our terrain. Because our terrain is closer to the terrain of Taiwan. Simple as that. Because if it's really for our soldiers to improve whatever capabilities they have, intelligence, etc., they can train anytime in the United States. Because we don't have enemies. Bakit naman tayo magkakaroon ng ganitong military exercises if we don't have enemies?
Thank you, Ms. Sasrogando Saso. Professor Ana Malindogoy, she's raising her hand via Zoom.
Okay. Thank you so much for recognizing me, moderator. Tama si Sase. Ang tanong kasi dyan, ang issue kasi dito is...
Hold on. You're
okay.
Hold on.
Dali lang, hindi ka pa
Okay lang.
Sorry kami.
Sabihan ako kung okay na. Okay na?
Audio.
Third world pa tayo sa ating technology
Yeah.
Okay?
Okay.
Okay,
Go
ganito yun. Ang ano ko naman, I actually agree with the question of SAS. Ano ba talaga? Kasi in the very first place, kung titignan mo ang nangyayari sa Pilipinas, not just the EDCA, and even all of these things like Air Force, American Air Force is flying into the Philippines, going through the different EDCA sites. Ano ginagawa nila sa Pilipinas? What is it really for? So yun yung mga tanong, kasi wala namang kasing transparency din nangyayari and accountability. And even questions of Filipino people cannot be answered properly. Walang explanation. So nalilito ang Pilipino kung ano ba talaga ang purpose. Why do you have that extensive and intensive military exercises, prepositioning of military assets in the country? What is it for? Hindi naman for local insurgency yan kasi hindi naman ganun kalakas na ang CPP and PA. Are we preparing for what? Are we, ano bang piniprepare ba tayo for what? Yun yung malaking tanong kasi na hanggang ngayon hindi sinasagot at walang explanation binibigay. So kung gusto ng current administration, this question will not be raised over and over again. Probably the right thing to do is provide explanation properly. And then give us a little of, respect as Filipinos kung ano ba ang ginagawa natin sa bansa natin. Kasi baka mamaya paggising natin, nasa gitna na tayo ng gera. Yun eh. So, ang hirap ng mga ganyang statement kasi lalong lumalabo, imbis na klaraduhin nila, lumalabo. I mean, I understand that we have the BFA, we have the MDT, and all of this military agreements and defense agreement with the United States. But I don't think these are absolute in every sense. I think there are limits to it and there are boundaries. Ang tanong, bakit din parang walang upper hand ang ating bansa at ang current government when it comes to this military exercises. And even to some extent, we're being militarized as a country. Yun yung mga bagay na dapat linawin ng current administration if they really want the Filipino people not to ask questions and not to be, wondering why things are happening like this. Hindi naman kasi blind tayo at hindi rin naman tayo mga stupid people not to see what is going on. These are not rocket science. Even a high school student can figure it out kapag binasa niya at tinitingnan niya kung ano nangyayari. So yun yung yun yung pakiusap ko lang sa ating existing administration that, we deserve an explanation about these things. I think every Filipino deserve that. That's my answer to the question. Thank you.
So you can extend the time, no? Just that's not my question.
Thank you, Professor Ana Uy, for your answer. Great answer.
Pick up your lunchbox outside. Go to lunch.
Okay, any further questions from the media? Please introduce yourself.
May question na po.
Since yung Sona po is on Monday na po, what is your, ano po yung inaasahan mo na sasabihin ng Pangulong Marcos ngayon sa Sona?
Well, ano ba inaasahan ko? Kung ano, I think ila-launch na yung bagong Pilipinas na branding. Kilig naman kasi mag-branding na. And to be honest, I would like him to report to the nation on what actually we gained from his decision on EDCA. Kasi yung balita sabi more Chinese bullying. Di ba doon yung pangako niya pag nagkaroon ng pag additional EDCA sites would deter China. Bakit may balita ka na more bullying? So ibig sabihin, it's a failure. So dapat itigilan natin tong solusyon na to. Ano pang gagawin natin para magtagumpay yan? Saka I'm not really sure what I want to hear from the Sona kasi kasi before naman kasi ng Sona dapat may mga naririnig tayong mga nangyayaring maganda. May mga nangyayaring namang maganda but it's not, I think hindi the expectation and the reality do not match that well under his administration. And I think he should explain why is that so. I think naman everyone deserves that explanation.
Well, I am hoping, but I am hoping against hope that he can still reverse the policy of accepting these new bases, which is now numbered 17. Ano? Hindi lang siyam po, kundi 17 na. At hindi natin masabi kung ilan po ang bubunga pa sa mga susunod na panahon. Si Presidente Duterte mismo ay nagsabi na sobrang marami na yung 17. And when is this going to stop? So I would wish that for the sake of the Filipino nation, maibalik na niya yung patakaran sa ating ugnayang panlabas doon sa independent foreign policy.
Yeah.
Kita natin nung panahon ni Presidente Duterte, yung ating narinig dati na equidistant, parehong distansya sa China at sa Estados Unidos. Hindi po tulad ngayon na nakapasok na naman po tuloy-tuluyan ang Amerika sa Pilipinas. Naiulat ko sa inyo yung mga problema at yung mga kapinsalaan na ating aktual na nadadanas na po dahil sa pagkalapit ulit ng Pilipinas sa Estados Unidos. Hindi tayo makagalaw doon sa mga programa para sa development ng ating ekonomiya, ating infrastruktura. Hindi na makagalaw ang tubig, yung ating project for the Kaliwa Dam. Yung ating turismo ay napipinsala ng napakatindi po itong taon na ito dahil po yung loss of the Chinese market due to the sabotage of the Chinese tourism market by some American elements in our Department of Foreign Affairs. Yung pagkakalason ng ating academic climate sa mga academic communities po natin. So kung hindi gawin po yan ni Presidente Bongbong Marcos, which I expect he will not do anything about it dahil as has been said, he's a weak president, then it's the people, the Filipino people that should do something about it.
Let me reply as well, no?
May pahabol ako. Ang gusto ko marinig
Okay.
sa Sona ni PBBM is that he finally rejected the request of the United States
Yes.
for the Philippines to house the
Afghan.
Afghan special immigrant US visa applicants. So I think that's what I want to hear. No, na ni-reject niya na yung request ng United States.
Let me give my perspective, no? Okay ba?
Go ahead.
Okay. First, tinanong din ako actually ng isang media outlet on this. Ano daw ba ang expectations ko at anong gusto kong marinig sa Sona, which would happen on Monday. First and foremost, I think despite the fact that I have really reservation in terms of achievements ng current administration during the first year of PBBM, kasi sa dami ng kontrobersiya since the beginning, no? Kaano pa lang yan ng kanyang hindi pa nga siya ata nag-3 months sa kanyang pagkakaupo bilang presidente. Ang dami-daming controversies. I want an explanation to all of these things, especially when you talk about agriculture and then yung foreign policy niya. Ano ba talaga ang direction niya? Kasi they claim that we do have an independent foreign policy. Lahat ng mga, I think, personally, I've witnessed that many times over, no, from the president himself and other officials of government. But I want to know what is it really all about, because on the ground I don't see it really. So I want, for the benefit of the doubt of the current administration, gusto kong marinig yun. What do you mean by that? In concretely, paano mo nasabing independent foreign policy ka when you have all of the manifestations that the foreign policy of the Philippines is leaning towards the United States or has pivoted already? At least on my side, I really still have that kind of reserve, meron pa akong space to before I make my own conclusion about all these things. Nandun pa ako sa level na I'm trying to give the current administration the benefit of the doubt, really, on my side. Another one is, gusto ko malaman, ano ba talaga ang rebranding na yan ng Bagong Pilipinas? At yung mga sinasabi nila about Bagong Pilipinas, in what sense? Kasi I don't see really the change that they're talking about. I want to be clear about it. Another thing, I want an explanation as well about the Air Force. Anong nangyayari dyan? Bakit may ganon? Bakit parang walang explanation na mabuti? At ano tawag nito, parang it's an assault to the sovereignty of the Philippines. Assault yan sa soberenya ng Pilipinas eh. Another thing is the ICC. Ano ba ang stand ng current administration on the ICC issue na binabato sa Pilipinas na ngayon 2 Duterte ang nai-involve? The current VP and the former president, and we are not party to the ICC. So ano ang stand ng current government on that? And that is in the hand of the president. Kasi siya ang architect ng foreign policy. At the end of the day, sa kanya manggagaling ang desisyon. That's a very, very critical issue that the current administration has to make a concrete stand and, you know, give us Filipinos a solid explanation and stand on this issue. Kasi ano yan eh, for me, it's really challenging the sovereignty of the country if the ICC will push further investigation whatsoever. So that's one. And also, ano yung explanation sa tourism video fiasco? Kasi alam niyo, marami akong nabasa ng mga reports, not just in the Philippines, pati sa iba't ibang panig ng mundo. So ano ba talaga ang explanation doon? Wala bang investigation? Nothing happens and we just all forget about this? So parang ganun, there are a lot of issues that needs explanation. And I think Filipino people deserve to hear the explanation on all of these issues. And of course, I want to hear as well kung ano ang achievement ng current administration when you talk about economic development and prosperity. Mayroon ba? That one is I'm very interested as well. So that's my answer to the question. Thank you. Back to the moderator.
Thank you, Professor Ana Malindogoy, Ms. Sasrogando Sasot, and Mr. Herman Laurel for your answers on the media question regarding the Sona this Monday. Are there any other further questions from the media, from our media friends?
From anyone.
From anyone?
Ayun daw.
Bali, kasi mukhang wala tayong na-convince yung fear-mongering at saka war-mongering ng US. Mukhang talagang napunta tayo sa gere. Bilang analistas, kailan sa tingin mo mangyayari yung gera na yun? Kasi mukhang wala tayong magagawa eh. Mukhang doon talaga tayo papunta eh. 2028, 2030?
Well, according to the National Security Strategy of the United States ng 2022, ang tinitingnan nilang window period ay 10 years. So 2022 to 2032 na kailangan daw nilang makagawa ng mga decisive turns para ma-maintain ng United States ang kanilang position sa mundo. So kung ano yung mga decisive turns o mga decisive factors na kailangan nilang gawin, I think all bets are on the table, and that includes war. Now, I think, you know, the United States and its think tanks, its even U.S. Congress has been wargaming a future war in our region between the United States and China. And we are already actually being primed. The Economist, you know, the magazine The Economist, they released economic intelligence, the EIU, Economic Intelligence Unit, released a report and already determined the countries that would be at risk if there's a war that would break out between China and the United States. And South Korea, Japan, and the Philippines were identified as particularly at more risk of a preemptive strike from China. So sa wargaming nila, there are 3 different dates, no, na pinapresent: 2026, 2027. Kasi I think the farther, kasi this all depends on whether the United States will ever accept that it's no longer number 1.
Mawawala yung petrodollar pag hindi na sila number 1. Mawawala yung...
Yeah, but that's the thing. The stability of the world depends on the United States being humble. So yun. The stability of the world depends on the United States being humble enough to accept that it's no longer number 1. And pero ako, for me, we would know the definite shape of world politics after January 2024. Because that's the election in Taiwan. So if it's the Kuomintang that wins, maybe we would still be able to live, a little bit longer. But if it's not the Kuomintang, may God have mercy on all of us.
Well, nabanggit ni Madam Sasot yung Taiwan elections. No? Idadagdag ko naman yung American elections in 2024 November. Kasi po, at the rate things are going, the warmongering political parties sa US is really aggressively now the Democrats, no? At si Biden. Si Trump has been forced to come out and say that he will stop the Ukraine war in one day when he becomes president and so on and so forth. But that doesn't mean that the US deep state will not keep pushing for war. Second point ko, at the state of things now in the United States and its war plans, mukhang hindi nila makakaya talaga manggera ng ibang bansa at lalo-lalo na laban sa China itong 2025 or 2027 because even today, the US industrial machinery is not ready to supply the requirements of Ukraine in its war against Russia. It is still behind in hypersonic missile technology. They had a recent test which failed the United States. So the reality is, although I do not want to downplay the war possibility from the US in the next 2-3 years, the fact is, in all-round corporation wargaming, they have never won a single one against China in the Asian region. This is confirmed by, if you listen to interviews of Colonel McGregor ng United States, former advisor ng ni President Trump sa military affairs, former Marines Scott Ritter, Brian Berletic, who are very actively against the Ukraine war and reporting on the status of the military capabilities of NATO in the United States. Hindi nila kaya manalo sa China in this region. So but of course, China's attitude is hope for the best, but keep your powder dry. So ang China po has now a bigger navy than the United States, 340 surface ships, not counting the submarines, versus the United States 300 surface warships. Merong mga Amerikano na dina-downgrade po yung kanilang view of the Chinese Navy dahil daw 10% of that or a big part of that, 100 ships of the 340 ships are Coast Guard. But as you may have come across the report this past few days, the mother of all Coast Guard ships that came out into the scene in the South China Sea to show its force, can easily be converted to warships anytime. So maraming complicated reasons why, as if you ask military experts today, if the United States is capable of a war and winning a war in Asia, most factors would point to the situation where the Americans cannot win a war and would not start the war yet. No?
We are talking about conventional war of the US.
Yes.
Pero hindi natin pinag-uusapan ng nuclear.
Yeah.
Yung ginagawa sa US is assuming all conventional na nuclear.
Yeah. Okay. Ihabol ko in response to that. No. So the assumption is the US will not start a nuclear war. As we can see also in Ukraine, pagdating doon sa threat ng Russia that they are crossing a red line and may allow Russia to escalate into the use of even tactical nuclear weapons, umaatras ang Estados Unidos. Kaya in the last NATO summit sa Vilnius, Biden very clearly said hindi tatanggapin sa NATO ang Ukraine kasi red line yun. Unless a crazy man assumes the presidency of the United States, we can assume that they're rational. Titigil sila doon sa boundary of a nuclear war. Ano? So anyway, give the mic now to Sasot.
I think the United States will not go directly to war with China. Just like it has not directly went to war against Russia. So dito sa region natin, it's going to be the same strategy. It will only use proxies to fight a war against China, because I think the overall intention of the United States is not necessarily to defeat China, because they cannot do that, but only to weaken China. And those are two different kinds of war. So there are wars that you would like to totally defeat the enemy, and then there are wars that you just want to kneecap the enemy. And I think that's what the United States is aiming for. And of course, we already see kung sino yung mga potential proxies, no? Taiwan, the Philippines. I think it's egging India, no, to be a proxy as well, and maybe Vietnam as well, no? Naghahanap na ng mga pwedeng potential proxies. And I think among all of them, I think tayo yung pinaka sa atin yung pinakamatindi yung propaganda na dinidevelop yung tinatawag na war mindset. Na we are being primed to hate. Diba? Na sobrang hate. I think it's palpable. I worked under Clarita Carlos sa NSC. In the Aquino administration. That's why there are a lot of diplomats during the Aquino administration who were marginalized and were threatened to be removed from service because they are not against China. As simple as that. You know, so I think it's not gonna be the a head-on collision between the United States and China. Kasi may hypersonic missiles na, no? May ICBMs na. Kung gusto maki-join ng there's no guarantee now that the war will not reach US mainland kung magkaroon ng head-on collision ang China and the United States. So I think the United States will use proxies. And I'm really worried that tayo yung parang para tayong napili sa bingo na pwedeng mauna, which makes sense, no? Na tayong mauna kasi we're the most dispensable US pawn. We're nothing in the, we're nothing in the geo-economic order of the world. When we're gone, nobody would even notice, I think. So I think yun yung nakakaano na tayo yung minamanipulate in order to hate this much. Kasi at least sa Taiwan, di ba, meron pang mga cooler heads, meron kang kumintang na against, na dito wala eh. Kita mo lahat ng senator, parang gusto mo, akala mo yung mga anak nila iaalay nila sa gera, di ba?
Yeah, I have to add this one last thing. No? Ang objective nga ng Estados Unidos ay hindi patalo ang China. Tulad ngayon sa Russia, sa Ukraine. They've tested Russia. They now know they cannot defeat Russia at this point in time. But what have they achieved? They've achieved, one, the destruction of the European Union economy and the German economy. Now they have incentives for German industry to go to the US instead of helping Germany. Ang target ng Estados Unidos sa gera sa Asia ay ma-depress ang Asia as an economic rival to the West. And I think it's very clear that the Americans have a program to revive their economy by stealing German industry to go to the United States. Now that the they have no chance of getting cheap Russian oil because the German economy was built on cheap Russian oil. And that is what they want to do in Asia. The target is not just China, but the target is the whole Asian economy. So like in Ukraine, they're fighting Ukraine to the last Ukrainian. Yun din ang gusto nilang gawin sa Pilipinas. No? Fight to the last Filipino and last drop of blood of Filipinos. See, may question.
Let me,
Austin.
very quick lang.
Professor Anna.
Okay,
Go ahead,
very
go ahead.
quick. Okay. One thing that I want to emphasize, no, I don't think any countries in Asia would want to have a war. That's one thing I can say, I think, at this time, no. And even China, I don't think so, because that would be counterproductive to the rise of China as an economic giant in the world. But one thing also we have to remember is China will defend its integrity and as a country, I think, and especially when you cross red lines. And one of the red lines that's very much hot at this time na kailangan isipin mabuti ng current administration na sana hindi tayo gamitin ay ang Taiwan Strait. So I think that's one point. Second is we don't have problem with China really when it comes to issues. Ang isa lang dyan is ang pinakaano lang talaga critical na nagkakaroon tayo ng gitgitan is the South China Sea. But even this issue, I don't think it would lead to like military confrontation between our two countries. I don't see it. Only if we will allow the Americans to push us into that kind of situation. So it's very, very important for the current administration to really see ano ba talaga ang direksyon nyo at kung ano ba talaga ang dapat mangyari at dapat para sa Pilipinas. Kasi kung ang Pilipinas lang will strike a balance between its relation with the United States and China, then probably will be spared by any kind of war plans that the United States are planning against China. Second, I agree with Sas. Hindi yan magiging direct confrontational war if in any case a war breaks out in the Asia-Pacific region, either via using the Taiwan Strait issue or the South China Sea. Hindi yan directly na confrontation between the two superpowers. It will be a proxy war. And isa sa kinatatakutan ko, I'll be very straightforward, is tayo ang nasa front row na baka gamitin as proxy. Okay, yun yung problema, either sa South China Sea or Taiwan. So I think the most important for us is to come up and really to calibrate our foreign policy, that it should, I'm not saying that we don't have any relationship with the United States, because that would be impossible, especially under this administration. But what I'm saying is strike a balance, stick to that equidistance na meron ang Duterte administration. And balance your relationship and take a hold of your country, especially when you talk about military, na hindi tayo dapat nasa yung decision making, yung mga boundaries na dapat i-observe ng United States in our relation with them, since we have the MDT still, we have the BFA, and we have all of these agreements with them. We need to have an upper hand. That's why it's very important for the current administration to think through EDCA. Kasi ang EDCA may window of opportunity pa, hindi pa, nasa level pa tayo na pwede tayong mag-decide. Either we disregard it really totally because 2024 next year, nandun tayo sa point na yun. Second is, if in any case, tali ang government at least try to take a look at those agreements, at those provisions in EDCA and put it in a way that would be advantage for us, not that it will be under the control or semi-control of the United States. Yun eh. Kasi at the end of the day, pag nagkagit-gitan at nagkaroon ng problema at naging proxy tayo sa whatever kind of gera na gagawin, well, 10 years from now or 15 years from now, doesn't matter. No? Sino naman ang kawawa doon tayo? And after that, would we exist still as a country? Bigyan ng importansya at reflection. Kasi may time to maneuver eh. There's time to maneuver, there's time to change things. There's time to to adjust. Yun eh. Pero ang time kasi it's ticking as well. Mabilis ang oras eh. So kailangan siguro natin pag-isipan tong mga to. Yun yung sinasabi ko lang, no? Parang ang hirap ng sitwasyon kasi nasa gitna tayo eh. So sana alisin natin yung sarili natin na magiging target tayo or magagamit tayo ng whatever kind of military confrontation that might break out in either in the South China Sea or the Taiwan Strait. Nasa kamay natin yon, and we can do it as an independent sovereign country if we have to stand on it. Kasi sino ba ang magtatanggol sa Pilipinas kung di ang Pilipino? So yun eh. We have to be wise this time around. Yeah. Thank you.
Hello. Hello. Yeah. Okay. Magandang magandang umaga sa mga napag-usapan sang-ayon ho tayo. Yung mga tinalaki kanina ng mga eksperto natin. For those who are not following, you should be following Sas Rogando Sasot sa For the Motherland and yung Asia Century on Facebook and YouTube, no, kasi about the mind conditioning na binanggit nga ni Sas kanina, nakita natin ito yung pagbisita ni former President Duterte, di ba, sa Beijing. So even when Biden demonizes China, the following week or the following month, the richest billionaires from the US, si Elon Musk, si Bill Gates, si Tim Cook, tapos yung si Blinken, si central banker US Yellen, tapos si John Kerry pumunta ng Beijing. 'Di ba? Pero yung sa atin, pag kakaibigan natin si China, dinimonize agad yung pagbibisita ni former President Duterte. No, so nakikita natin yung mind conditioning talaga is already at play, no, number one. Number two, yung mga ibang sinasabi ngayon na yung mga prinamis daw ni China o yung mga proyekto na binanggit ni China or prinamis ni China sa panahon ni Duterte ay hindi pa na-deliver. So gusto lang po natin to ma-share itong partial list lang to, no, ng mga benepisyo na nakuha natin kasi itong mga South China Sea issue, 'di ba? Ano ba talagang pakinabang ng taong bayan diyan? 'Di ba? Ang totoong pakinabang diyan ay trabaho, 'di ba? Nung panahon ni Duterte, over 100,000 Filipino jobs dahil sa mga proyekto ng China dito sa Pilipinas, no? Yung mga dinonate ng China ng mga medical supplies, ng mga vaccine na nakatulong sa maagang pagbubukas ng ekonomiya natin. At maraming mga hindi nababanggit na donasyon, no, katulad ng dalawang tulay diyan sa Intramuros, Binondo at Mandaluyong, Makati na humahalaga na over $150 million. 'Di ba ang sinasabi ng media natin yung 80 million or 100 million US dollars na bibigay ng US para diyan sa EDCA bases na yung 100, sabihin na natin $100 million para lang yan sa pagbubuo ng mga struktura na yung US din makikinabang and will become the targets of of the US enemies, no. Tapos over 10,000 tons of rice, no, binigay ng China doon sa mga bagyo na biktima ng mga bagyo, no, nung recent years. So marami ito hindi nabibigay, so mahalaga yung mga media friends natin na bigay ng space para sa mga ganitong maibanggit, no. At huling pangdagdag lang, we don't even have to talk about yung mga yung military exercises kasi former Secretary of Foreign Affairs Cayetano in a Senate hearing revealed that China has missiles in Hainan that can reach the Philippines in 6 minutes yata or 10 minutes, no. So ang laban ngayon ng gera hindi na yung tutukan o yung barilan ng harapan, ang laban ngayon drone, 'di ba, yung cyber warfare, yung space warfare. So hindi natin minsan nabibigyan ng tamang pagpapansin yung mga ganitong bagay, but as our experts mentioned, we just have to learn from Ukraine, 'di ba? Over 350,000 of their people have died, no, for a stupid war that both sides have warned, no, na ito lang yung gusto nilang kondisyon, bigyan lang kami ng security guarantee, at yung over 20% of the territory of Ukraine have already been lost, no. So marami tayong mga pwede pang pag-usapan. Maraming salamat.
Meron lang question from the chat. Okay, this is from Kathy Cruz. Knowing all the facts being laid out today, obviously, nagtetenggang kawali, tengang kawali, ba ang ibig sabihin nito, no? Ang liderato.
Yeah.
Do you have any other means to once and for all end these lies on the West Philippine Sea, like filing a position paper or formal complaint with the Supreme Court? Sas?
Well, sabi, do you have any other means to once and for all end these lies on West Philippine Sea? Well, stop electing liars. As simple as that. You know, Do we have a means? Actually, we don't, you know, because there's so much money to be made because of these lies. How much money do you think? Baka naman siguro mapatay ako sa'yo. How many of high-ranking military officials do you think we have that have their families na nasa Amerika na? Or may green card? How many of them are na kumikita pang kabuhayan? No, malaki magbigay ang United States. You know, it's a very generous country. To be fair, huh? It's a very generous country in terms of charity. It gives a lot, you know. In the United Nations, it's the #1 funder of peacekeeping operations, and it extends to everything. You know, during the Cold War, that's what the United States did. It bribed everyone, you know, to side to the United States. Ang hindi nga lang nila na bribe dito sa region natin, and I will say it categorically, is Lee Kuan Yew. The rest, they were bribed. So that includes Marcos Sr. No, so it's only Lee Kuan Yew who refused bribes from the United States, and it was actually documented. So ganyan din ngayon, because we are in a new Cold War. You know, ang enemy ngayon is China, and it will bribe everyone to hate China. There's so much money to be made and to be earned when you hate China. Kami nga lang, Diyos ko, ako nga lang, kung gago lang talaga ako laki-laki ng platform ko. Di ba, laki-laki ng platform ko? Ano ba naman yung gumawa ko na dito ng post na anti-China post every minute? Baka naman mabili ko na lahat ng bill. Baka naman fan sa Maharlika Investment Fund.
Oh, Maharlika Investment Fund, isa pa yan.
Kita niyo tong natin, forum natin na against sa United States. Tingnan ba? Ewan ko kung nakikita to ng mga tao kung gaano ka shabby. I'm sorry UP but it's shabby. Look how shabby our location is na hindi namin alam. Tingnan nyo yung mga events sponsored by the U.S. Embassy. U.S. State Department. Maraming events yan dito. May pa-cocktails pa sila afterwards. Hotel accommodation yung speaker lang naman nila. Taga dito lang naman sa, ano ba yan? Sa TAF lang naman yung di ba, Ana?
Totoo yan.
Masahe ko papunta dito hinanapan pa ng paraan pa ni Kamentong para makakuha ng pera.
Hinanapan pa ng paraan para lang mabigyan kang pamasahe.
Mahal mag-grab papunta dito sa UP, no? Ito naman na yung pagkain. Yung mga pa-event ng United States, may paano yan, may pa-cocktails, may formal event pa sila, may black, black tie event pa. Lahat, di ba? Kasi sinasabi ko sa inyo, kung gago lang talaga ako, ay nako, napakadaling kumita ng pera para lang magsabi ng, I love Uncle Sam, I love Uncle Sam. Siguro baka siguro automatic green card ako, Ana, no? Kung nagganyan-ganyan.
Oo, hindi lang yan. Baka mabili mo yung buong Manila.
Oo, kaya, isko, tingnan naman yung platform ko, no? Ang laki-laki at millions ang nakikinig sa akin. Paano kung gamitin ko yan sa ganyang paraan? Pero nandito tayo sa kaya nga bagong Pilipinas, di ba, may prinsipyo, may isang salita. Yun talagang bagong Pilipinas. Kaya nga, pagmasdan yung mabuti, yung mga nangyayari. Diyos ko, ilang kami nag-apply ng scholarship ng PhD sa China, hanggang ngayon nga, wala nga. Baka ma-reject mga kami. Pero pag sa US ka nag-apply.
Nako, sigurado ka with all the amenities and all of the,
baka hindi lang, baka bigyan na ako ng degree ka.
Hindi lang yun, baka bigyan ko yung hotel, mismo yung bahay mo, hotel na, hindi na dorm. Ako kasi nasa dorm.
Money that the United States is allotting for everyone to hate China. That's just the truth.
Nung nakaraang taon, 2022, in 2022, the U.S. Congress passed the Competition Act, no? Na dinagdagan nila ng $500 million for anti-China propaganda. So $500 million, we can see it in operation now. But my personal experience, of course, I used to be invited to the U.S. ambassador's residence, have dinner, and so on. By 2001, mga bata pa kayo. By 2001, pinutol na nilang relationship sa akin dahil kita nila hindi ako marirecruit. No? And after that, a few years later, ang mainstream media naman po, dito sa Pilipinas, shut out din ako, boycott. Akala natin, and this is no reflection on the reporters, it's hanap buhay. But the owners are really controlled by the Americans also. My 15-year-old 700 episode na satellite TV show was stopped this last week after 700 shows. Because tulad ng sunod-sunod na from SAS and SMNI and so on, pati kami na maliit na satellite TV pero na tie up na sa Sky Cable kaya talagang lumalawak ng aming audience, biglang pinutol. So don't think the mainstream media here is a free media. The fact that President Duterte as an ex-president says so many things that does not appear in the big newspapers and broadcast network shows you na kontrolado yung mga yan ng Amerikano rin. We can explain the economics behind the control of our mainstream media, but we do not have the time right now. But, yeah.
Bigyan ko lang kayo ng example, no? Di ba yung visit ni PRRD? Then suddenly, ANC News interviewed an ex-US Defense Department official, basically saying that Bongbong Marcos is on the right path. Gago ka pala, sabihin mo talaga on the right path. Ex-US Defense official ka, ano sasabihin mo? Diba? Biglang may interview na ganun. Ex-US, US Defense official. Diba, Ana? Ano ba yun?
Parang agad cambio agad. And may sinabi pa na parang you're on the right direction but the United States has to do more. Parang ganun.
Has to do more daw. Ano pa ba?
Ano pa ba yung do more mo? Inaano na nga tayo. Kulang na nga lang. Pangalanan tayong Philippines-US.
Ano nga lang dapat ano ba to? EDCA sites in every city. Pwede naman, di ba? Ayun na nga, kung makikita nyo, grabe yung pag-push nila ng agenda nila dito. Tomorrow pala, episode ko ng Statecraft, I interviewed si Einar Tangen. So he's like, he's an American based in Beijing. And then he's sa Asian Arts. Pinag-uusapan namin, the problem with China kasi, is very bad in PR. No? Very bad soft power capabilities. I'm so sorry sa mga kaso natin sa China, but that's very true. But I think that's inherent kasi with the attitude of the Chinese. That they're not really that like the Americans. Alam mo naman ng mga Americans, yan sila, di ba? Kaya mas magaling silang mambola yung mga Americans. Kaya kita mo, 'di ba? Si Bongbong ganyan lang si Bongbong, akala mo kulang na lang ibigay na lang niya lahat, no? Parang well, it's because it's the United States. If you lick the ass of the United States, you will get a Nobel Peace Prize. Ganun. Plus that, you're gonna be Time Person of the Year. They have all these pampalaki ng ulo benefits, no? Which the United States is the only country in the world that does that gives all these candies for the egos. And other countries do not have that actually, no? They don't have much time and it's just not part of their culture. So kaya itong sinasabi na meron pa bang ibang magagawa? Well, actually, the greatest enemy of the United States is an educated population. That's their greatest enemy. That's why Europeans don't like them. They don't like Americans. Hindi sila mabalis mabola ng mga Amerikano. Although nakikipag-futsi-futsi lang yung mga Europeans sa United States because it's the United States that finance their defense. And because of that, they can give generous social welfare benefits to their population. Now, if Trump wins and then Trump says we will abolish NATO, magkakagulo din sa Europe kasi kailangan nilang magbayad na for the very first time ng defense nila. That's the truth of it. but they don't like America, but they don't like the United States, you know, for a lot of reasons. Tayo, we're not that educated. You know, our people are not that educated. Our public school system is not so much better than the public school education system than our grandmothers and grandfathers had. You know, yun yung problema. It's only and look at the media. Buti na nga lang wala na yung Channel 2, but they kept on appearing. For the longest time, you know, the show made the people dumb. You know, nobody would claim that they watch Channel 7 and they become more intelligent, or they watch Channel 2 and they become more intelligent, because they don't show anything that will make you intelligent. It will make you entertained, and that's the most difficult thing. And that's the time that your brain starts to shrink, when you're just being entertained. Kaya nga, there's really nothing we can do here, but you know, hopefully that our words will reach the conscience of our politicians, and that finally in the history of the Philippines, they will start to think more of the Filipinos than their bank accounts and pockets and offshore accounts, no? And their assets in the United States and Europe, and their dream of getting a US visa and Schengen visa, because that's all boils down to. They cannot be like Duterte.
Yeah.
Who can have a head-on collision with the West. Because number one, Duterte doesn't have any assets in the West. Any assets outside the Philippines. Andito lang yung mga assets niya sa Pilipinas. So hindi siya takot. Hindi siya takot maka-sanction. Pangalawa, wala naman siyang interest magka-US visa at magka-Schengen visa, no? And a lot of our politicians are actually afraid that if they started to speak against the United States, they will not be able to get a US visa. And every one of them wants to go to the United States. And I don't understand why, because it's a very ugly country. I've been to it's really an ugly country. There's nothing there. My God, why do you want to go to the country where McDonald's was born, or KFC? So, and everyone of them wants to go there, pero they have assets kasi, you know, their family are living in the United States. They have assets in the United States, etc. Sorry, Robin, magsasalita ako. Robin US visa was denied. I'm just gonna tell this openly. Sabi ni Robin, nung nag-apply daw siya, nanalaman ng US Embassy, halos daw siya, itratong hari, inilibot pa daw siya sa mga ganyan. And then eventually his US visa was denied. And you know what else what they did? They actually terrorized their relative in the United States.
Oh, wow.
Ganyan kayo kabastos, kayong Amerikano kayo.
Tinador yan ang bansa natin, ha?
Oh, yun lang masabi ko, no? That's how that's how arrogant the Americans are. Can you imagine, nilibot-libot ka kasi didinay ka. Tapos tinerrorize pa yung kamag-anak mo nasa United States, you know? The evil. It's a very evil country in the world. Oh my God. Kaya nga ang inaano ko how can you ever justify that you are pure pro-US? Pag tinatanong ako, ano ka ba, pro-US or pro-China, isa lang sabihin ko, well, one country stole 7,107 islands from our ancestors. They killed almost 1 million Filipinos. It's the first genocide of the 21st century. They exhibited our ancestors as if they are animals in zoos in New York. They stole a lot from the Philippines. My God, they even kidnapped the president, the father of the current president.
Absolutely.
Be out of my mind if I would say na I would consider that this country is the moral choice, because it will never be the moral choice, no? It is an insult to the blood of the 1 million Filipinos that this country killed, and that country is the United States of America. So, kaya nga yung mga politiko dyan na habos himod ng puwet, mahiya naman kayo doon sa mga ancestors nating namatay para ipaglaban tong Pilipinas. Kayo dyan nangungurakot lang kayo, tapos ano bang di ba, mahiya naman kayo sa mga Pilipinong namatay noon at pinatay ng mga Amerikano. Kahit nang man lang, pero we don't really expect that you would grow a conscience. But at least, no, at least grow some balls and spine if you don't have a conscience yet.
Okay. Danny, I think, meron pang tanong.
Last question ako. Since you mentioned the Maritime investment fund, since yung mga senator po natin nagsasabi na this will help the economy, nasusulong dito ang kinabukasan ng Pilipinas, according po sa isang representative. Hindi lang po ito open sa mga Pilipino na mag-co-investor but also sa foreign. Sa tingin niyo po ba ay makakatulong po talaga ito economically sa Pilipinas?
Well, makakatulong if the investment is managed well. Hindi makakatulong if it's not managed well. But the thing is, it will not, the benefit is not immediate. Syempre may ROI yan, no? Ano ba? Hindi naman niya kinabukasan, or I don't think that we will reap the benefits during the time of Bongbong if indeed it was managed well. But if it's not managed well, goodbye 500 million.
500 billion pala.
Well, kung may mga investment opportunities, why not invest it today from those financial institutions where they will draw the money and capital from for the Maharlika Investment Fund? Kukuha pa sila sa, I think, still Land Bank, ano, and,
Land Bank.
and Bangko Sentral. These are public funds pa rin. Bakit sila kukuha dyan? Ano? Now, investment funds do very well during good times in the global economy. This is the worst of times in the global economy with fears of wars and so on coming in. Ano? So they have not answered all the fundamental questions about the Maharlika Fund. Bakit nyo tinatayo? Baka may pangako nga sila. Mayroong ibang naniniwala na this will really bring in the money, maybe the stolen money, kung stolen man yon, ng Marcos family and the other oligarchs, no? But why do you need a Maharlika investment fund if it's just to bring in the money? No, there are so many ways for them to bring in their money. The suspicion is very high about this fund, no? And yung mga pangako nilang napakaganda, napakabango, mukhang talagang pang-cover up lang sa ibang mga plano na that will not really benefit the country.
All right. Thank you to everyone who participated in today's forum. Thank you once again to our panelists, Mr. Herman Laurel, Mr. Adol Paglinawan, Ms. Sas Rogando Saso, and Professor Ana Malindog Uy. Thank you.
Moderator, I just want to read a comment coming from a colleague here in Beijing, China, who's teaching in a university, no, and he's an American. So I want to read, if you allow me,
Go ahead, Professor.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Let me read. This is very interesting comment, which I appreciate from my good friend, Mr. Mark Levin. He is a professor, no, and he is also he was awarded as a Friendship Award, China Friendship Award, by the PRC. But this is ang importante yung comment niya, which is very important for Filipinos to hear. Sabi niya, I'm an American who has happily and proudly lived and taught in the PRC for the past 18 years because he is a professor. My courses on the U.S., particularly our history, are quite critical, when I am asked what is good about the United States, I answer that the most of our people are fundamentally good if we are told the truth, if they are told the truth. That's what he's saying. But that doesn't happen very often. I appreciate today's seminar, which provided much truth about the U.S. relationship with the Philippines and China. Thank you. So thank you, Professor Mark Levin, for that very very inspiring and at the same time very gracious comment and appreciation that for this media forum. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Mark, for that wonderful comment. And once again, thank you to all of our audience here and our panelists. Like what Ms. Sas Rogando Sasot said, we might not have the black tie events, we might not have the cocktails, we might not have the best sound system, but what we have is the truth. Thank you very much.
That one, I really agree. We don't have much, but we will stand on what is the truth. That's one thing sure.
Maraming salamat sa inyo lahat and we'll have future sessions again here in the Bayan. Okay, thank you very much.
No.